Today I'm going to be talking about Ardelyx, a biotech company that gave their earnings report on the 1st of August, and it was an absolute banger. In this video I'm going to be going through the highlights of that earnings report, talking about other changes which have happened since my last video, and also I'm going to be talking about what I think has happened with the stock price. Okay, so first of all, let's look at the finances, and the revenues came in at 72.6 million, which beat the top estimates from any of the analysts. This is an increase of 26.9 million from the previous 45.7 million. That's a 60% increase in just one quarter. So that's made up of Ibisrela, which was up 7.1 million from 28.3 million to 35.4 million. That's a 25% increase in one quarter. The rest was exposure, which was up 17 million from 15.1 million to 37.1 million, and that's a 145% increase in just one quarter. What is also important to point out is that the net income losses decreased from 26.5 million to 16.5 million. That's a $10 million difference, or a 38% reduction in just one quarter. So with all this increase, you'd expect the stock price to shoot up significantly, right? But if we were to go to the chart here, we can see in the last month, it did try to break out a little bit here. It went from 550 up to, I think, it's a higher for about 610 there. But it's since fallen down to 566, which, yeah, is just a complete joke, really. It's just up a few percentage points from that blowout quarter. So through this video, I'm going to be taking a look at that, see if there's any real reason for that to be happening. So first of all, I want to go through some of the things that have changed since my last video, and one of those is that Ardelyx said that they are not going to apply for the TDAPA. Now, TDAPA was going to allow them to sell Exfosa at that normal price, even if they were going to be added to the bundle, which is going to happen on the 1st of January unless something changes. But they didn't want to apply for it because they thought that other drugs that had applied for this program actually didn't end up getting the sales that they were expecting to get. Now, they did release a conference about this, and they were a bit shady about answering the questions. It did make me wonder why they are being shady, but I am hoping that the reason for this is that they are quite confident that they will see this HR 5074 bill go through. Now, there are no guarantees about this, of course, but again, in the ER report, it does sound like he's quite confident, and that he also possibly has some other options if that were to fall through, but we can go through that a bit more in detail later. So something else that Ardelyx have done since my last video is to launch a lawsuit against the CMS, and they have done this in partnership with the American Association of Kidney Patients, which is the nation's largest independent kidney patient organization, and also with the National Minority Equality Forum, the nation's largest minority healthcare research, education and advocacy organization. To be honest, because they are fighting a government body, I do think it's going to be harder than just what it says in the lawsuit, and also on top of that, I think it's going to take a long time for this to play out. However, I do think this is still a good move for the company. It's going to apply some pressure in the meantime. Hopefully it's going to look good when they're trying to get that 5074 bill passed. So I do approve of this generally. However, what I would point out is that if we take a look here at the release, it was released on the 17th of July, and then if we go to, hopefully I've still got the chart here, we can see that it correlated with a significant decrease in the stock, so the stock market did not take this well. We can also see a massive decrease here, and this is when they announced the TDAPA, that they wouldn't be applying for the TDAPA. So we can see that those two events have had a significant effect on the stock. So another important thing that happened, this did happen after the ER, but it's quite important, mostly because of what happened on the other side. But we had Susan Rodriguez leaving the CCO, and this caused a significant decrease in the stock. But we have had a new impressive CCO. His name is Eric Foster, and he's been appointed the CCO with an impressive track record working for big pharma, names including Amgen and GlaxoSmithKline. And he was also part of a small biotech company called Horizon Therapeutics. He made their stock price, or he was part of helping their stock price 100x in the time that he was there, and that eventually got acquired by Amgen. So a really impressive track record for Eric Foster, and I'm hoping he'll be able to help Ardelyx in the same way. Okay, so now that we've caught up with the things that happened since my last video, I want to go through the earnings call transcript. After that, I'm going to be talking about the stock price and where I think that's going to be heading in the future. So what I want to say about the earnings call transcript is that I got an overall good feeling about this earnings call. The directors seemed positive about the progress of the company, and they also sounded positive about the future of the company. Now, of course, they do have concerns about the drug going into the bundle, but it does sound like they thought a lot about different possibilities depending on what's going to happen in the future. So the transcript starts off with them talking about all the progress that they've been making with the sales and the launch of Exposure and Ibisrela. And then they start to talk a bit more about the lawsuit here that they have launched in collaboration with these other associations, but they don't really add much colour here. They do mention here that they're waiting for a government lawyer. That doesn't sound great to me. That sounds like they could be waiting some time for that. And here they talk about the TDAPA, and again they don't really add much colour onto what we already knew, unfortunately. So next they start talking about the financial results for the quarter, which we've already gone through. But one thing I'd really like to point out here is when they talk about the sales team. I find this really interesting. So they're talking about the expansion of the sales team, obviously how that is costing the company quite a bit of money, but they're saying that they expect the expanded sales team to begin having an impact later in this quarter. So this sounds to me like they're saying that the sales team actually hasn't had too much of an impact just yet. Obviously they've been hiring a lot of people, but they do mention here that it takes time for those people to be trained up and to get them into the field and get them up to speed. So they're saying that they actually should see a much bigger impact in this quarter. And if that is the case, and we saw 7 million growth in the last quarter, I am wondering, are we going to get a very pleasant surprise for the growth of Ibisrela in the next quarter? One thing that does stand out to me though is that they haven't yet increased the guidance for Ibisrela for the year, which sits at between 140 million and 150 million. Now this quarter they did 35 million, so you would expect that to come out at 140 million for the year, but that wouldn't include the expected growth. So say they were to grow by 7 million next quarter, then that would be cancelled out by the first quarter, and then the next quarter after that, if they grew 7 million again, they'd actually be 14 million ahead of the 140 million, so they'd be sitting at 154 million. And then if they also get an impact from the expanded sales team, we could see this way above that number. So I'm actually a bit surprised they haven't raised that guidance yet, and I'm wondering if they're waiting to see the impact of the sales team from the next quarter, and again hopefully that is going to be a pleasant surprise. Another thing that I would like to talk about here is they talk about the SG&A here. They're saying that they're expecting that to go to 80 million, and currently that is sitting at 64.7 million, so that's going to go up an extra 15 million. I think that went up by about 11 or 12 million in the last quarter, but yeah, if you were to say, for example, that was going to be half and half in the next 2 quarters, then that's only a $7.5 million increase, so we should see already a more significant increase in the bottom line. Now, of course, this is going to be more significant once the SG&A stops, but just having this reduced for the next 2 quarters and seeing the upside to the bottom line, I think it's going to be quite positive on the stock price. Another thing I'd like to point out is a bit further down in the questions and answers is when he was asking about what would happen on January the 1st if they don't get that extension that they're looking for. So he talks about here about their care program, so the patients that need the drug are going to be able to get it. But then in the same paragraph he talks about ultimately that patients might not be able to get this drug if the CMS continues on the path that they are going on. So this actually raises a lot of questions. Will these patients be able to access the drug or not? Is this the type of threat that they're trying to give to CMS at the moment, that if they include them in this bundle that some patients might not get the drug? And then if the patients aren't getting the drug, then you know, what's the care program doing? Is it only given to a limited amount of people? How is that going to work? So it raises a lot of questions, this for me. It's as clear as mud, to be honest. So let's see if we can get any more light on that on the upcoming conferences. So another thing I found interesting was here when he was asked a question about contingency plans if the CMS were to put them into the bundle. And he says that he would absolutely love to share with us at this stage, but he thinks it's too premature. He says he doesn't want to get ahead of his skis, which I think is an interesting metaphor, but he says that he does believe that there are opportunities, which means that even if the CMS does add us to this bundle, there could be a plan B or even a plan C. We don't know. So I don't think all hope is lost if we aren't to put in the bundle, and I certainly think that that is good news. So that's everything that I found interesting in this earnings report. So next I'd like to talk about the stock price a little bit. So leading into that, I'll talk about the analyst upgrades. I was a bit surprised about this, to be honest. I don't think they were that incredible, to be honest. We had Wedbush here, they start at the 11. Citigroup raised from 10 to 12, and HC Wainwright, they increased from 10 to 11. Now, considering the blowout quarter, I'm very surprised that Wedbush would stay at the same amount. And the other two, like 10 to 12, that's understandable. 10 to 11 seems a bit low to me. They beat the estimated revenue by at least 10%, so I would have thought it would be a bit more than that. Additionally, we do have those additional sales members who are currently in training, who are going to come into force in the next quarter, and hopefully we're going to get that pleasant surprise in the next quarter. Okay, so let's take a look at the stock price. Now, this is really interesting because we started off the year floating around the $10 mark. That was the pre-announcement just before the ER. And then we fell down pretty much to where we were before. The next ER came out, another boost, and then we fell down even lower. We had the bit just before TDAPA, we had that rise just before the fall when they announced that they weren't going to apply for TDAPA. And then now we've come up to our earnings. We've had a blowout earnings and hardly a rise at all in the stock there. So to be honest, I think the big thing here for me is that it's macro at the moment which is governing this stock. And to be honest, I don't see that macro improving. At the same time, I do think this stock is already quite cheap. So I'm hoping further moves in the macro. If it were to go down, it does look like recession could be likely at the moment. And if the rest of the market goes down, I'm hoping Ardelyx has already taken that hit, but let's see. I think we do have some potential catalysts coming up here. We could get new news on the lawsuit. We could get news on the HR 5074 bill getting passed. On top of that, we could get news about the release of either Ibisrela or exposure in different countries. So I do think there's quite a few things that can affect this stock before the next ER, but it's certainly looking quite cheap for me at the moment. So one thing I would like to talk about before I go is that I am a big fan of the StockTwits page. Some really great people on there, really good community. But one thing that does annoy me is that, for example, this guy here, he posted a post saying that 85% of dialysis patients are on Medicare, 5% on Medicaid, which only actually leaves 10% market access to Ardelyx. Quite a few people responded to this quite angrily, and to me this doesn't make sense. I mean, it did turn out this guy was mostly full of hot air, didn't really know what he was talking about, but these are actual true facts. And so if anyone posts true facts, I just don't understand why people get angry at it. For me, this was an opportunity to find out more about the company, and as I did go into looking into this, he is indeed correct. I mean, there is only 10% getting directly private insurance. But what I did find out on top of that is actually, even if you have private insurance, normally Medicare or Medicaid will pay for you. And that's why there is these statistics. And then I went through other statistics that I found. I used ChatGPT to see how many people who were getting Medicare on dialysis would have been part of private insurance as well. And in the end, I came up with these same numbers that we were all used to, that 55% will be going through Medicare because they need Medicare, and 45% will be doing it through insurance. So we should still be able to keep that 45%. But I just wanted to point out that, you know, this guy was putting up facts and people were being quite abusive towards him. Instead of actually thinking about that, doing the research, finding out about the company and how the Medicare system and the insurance works. And now that I know that, I'm in a much stronger position. I feel more confident about the company, more confident about my investment. So I'm happy that this guy brought this information up, even though in the end it was misleading. To be honest, I don't think he intended it to be that way. I just don't think he's really done his research that well. But yeah, I welcome this type of discussion, and I think as a community we should all do that.